Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has wrapped up his tour of 3 Southeast Asian countries. Russia's invasion of Ukraine dominated talks at the G20, APEC and ASEAN summits, and China's strategic ambitions in the Asia-Pacific. To help me talk through the week that was in politics is political commentator Dr. Sherry Sufi. Good to see you again, Sherry. He's in Perth. And for the first time on this particular panel is Elizabeth Morison from the Australia Institute in Canberra. Welcome to you both. So first to you, Elizabeth, how would you rate the Prime Minister's performance this summit season?
Oh, well, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I think Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is doing a really positive job on the global stage on our international relations just by not being Scott Morrison. We all remember Macron calling Scott Morrison a liar, and I think a fresh face for Australian politics has been a really, really positive thing. There have been a lot of really important improvements on international diplomacy. For example, the first meeting with China in a very long time, that was led by Anthony Albanese. We've seen Chris Bowen leading on loss and damage at COP in Egypt. And we've also seen Sean Turner come home after some successful negotiations with Myanmar. So I think it's really great to see a fresh face leading Australia in the global sphere. And it's great to have a bit of improvement in Australia's integrity on the global stage.
OK, so a positive review there. Sherry, what do you think about Anthony Albanese's performance at the summits?
Thanks, Kenny. Look, I think from the point of view of optics and symbolism, it is tremendous to see that an Australian leader is meeting with a Chinese leader for the first time in half a decade or so since our relations severed. We're at the peak of our relations under the Abbott era in 2014, and things haven't been easy ever since. But at the same time, the G20 summit is not a giant picnic, Kenny. It is a coming together of the leaders of 20 of the world's highest functioning economies, and the purpose for these conferences is to discuss bilateral trade, improve mutual cooperation and trade relations. So from that point of view, before Albo went into this summit, our greatest challenge was our presently damaged relationship with China, and that, as far as I can tell, continues to be the case now, especially coming from a purely from a West Australian point of view, Kenny. They're our biggest trading partner, and it's easy for commentators and pundits to say that we need to diversify who we trade with and look to alternative markets, and I'll certainly support that in principle, but that's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to be able to lessen our reliance on China overnight. So insofar as China continues to be our largest trading partner, I think more needs to be done to repair that relationship, and I'm not really sure to what extent there's been a net difference after this meeting. But I do accept that the symbolic value is great. Yeah. It's good that they're talking at least.
Well, there's been a lot of commentary, hasn't there, trying to decipher the meeting between Anthony Albanese and China's President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the G20 in Bali on Tuesday night. It's the first between the Chinese leader and Australian Prime Minister in 6 years. But nothing practical or material coming from that meeting yet, but the PM saying it's a good step. Elizabeth, does this meeting show that Xi is realising his wolf warrior politics against Australia, is counterproductive, or, as you say, is it just because he's not Scott Morrison?
I think this meeting with Xi Jinping and Anthony Albanese is a really practical, positive step forward. Let's not forget that China's diplomacy is led by the president in a really significant way. And so he sets the tone and the pace of that negotiation. This meeting is a really, really important green light for coordination between Australia and China. And that's important for lots of reasons. Firstly, being that China is our biggest trading partner, bigger than the next 4 of our trading partners combined. So it's a really important relationship to keep working. And China is a really big export market for Australia as well. So it's going to be really important to see that dialogue happening. I think it's a really positive and practical first step.
Sherry, not so sure whether you saw, but there was that jovial meeting as well between French President Emmanuel Macron and Anthony Albanese, seemingly best friends. Of course, relations soured with France under the Morison government due to the AUKUS submarine deal, but there's new hope the French president will even come to Australia. What are your thoughts on that meeting?
He is very welcome to come to Australia. We want good relations with everyone where it is possible to do so. Look, again, I go back to my earlier point, Kenny. The G20 summit is serious business. It has a serious set of KPIs. And again, when we look at our relations with France through that prism, as you correctly point out, the relations did take a bit of a hit after the previous government made a decision to do away with the original deal with the French subs and to work more closely with the British and the Americans to build nuclear subs. I understand the reasoning behind that decision, and I can also understand why the French would be upset about that. So, yes, the run-in that the two had, Albo and Macron, is interesting to see. But what has been the net difference? Because what the French really want is for us to go back to that original deal. And as far as I can see, that's not happening.
It's not going to happen, is it?
So, look, it's not going to happen. So, and it doesn't need to be perfectly honest. I mean, I completely support the deal that we have right now, but...
Yeah. All right.